And now this is really my absolute pleasure as a former Midwesterner to introduce Chef Abra Berens, who is the chef at Granor Farm in Three Oaks, Michigan. She is a former farmer, a proud Michigander, and a lifelong diehard Midwesterner. Granor Farm is a place where farm and table are side by side. It's certified organic. They grow vegetables, flowers, herbs, and grains. Chef Abra began her career at Zingerman's Deli in Ann Arbor. She trained at Ballymaloe Cookery School in Cork, Ireland. She's also an author of a book called Roughage, A Practical Guide to Vegetables, which was nominated for a James Beard Award for Vegetable-Focused Book. And then recently she released Grist, A Practical Guide to Cooking Grains, Beans, Seeds, and Legumes. Her food is elegant and approachable. She's knowledgeable, a great teacher. Through her work with Granor Farm and with a regional grain group called Artisan Grain Collaborative, she is a fierce advocate for local, regional, and sustainable food systems and their producers. And also, she wants you all to find joy in your pantries. So please join me in welcoming Chef Abra Berens.
Thanks so much, Jennifer, and thanks to CIA for having me. As Jennifer was saying, I really feel like my North Star as a chef is to try to create a connection between our consumers and the people who are growing this food for us. About 100 years ago, 30% of our population were farmers, and today it's about 3%. And one of the consequences of that is fewer and fewer people are interacting with farmers. And I think the farmers that we're interacting with the least are the ones who are growing a lot of these pulses and grains at scale. They're inherently in a rural setting and don't always have direct connection to the marketplace. And I think that you all as food service professionals have an opportunity to kind of bring people together in that way. And when I think about how to bring people together, it's often about how to kind of meet people where they are, if they're adventurous eaters or not, and give them a window into it. So the 3 demonstrations I'm going to do today are meant to give people kind of different access points and get them excited about an ingredient. You know, American thinker and writer Wendell Berry is famous for saying, you can't love something unless you know it. And as chefs, you know these ingredients so well. And so what I hope that you'll be able to do is know them in a new way and play with their textures and different flavor combinations in order to get some other people to know it too, your customers, your students, the people who are interacting with your businesses. So that's a long-winded way to say we're going to do 3 things that all kind of play on each other and have different textures and flavors and combinations that are hopefully comforting, familiar, but also exciting. The first dish is going to be a dish of braised cranberry beans, which we've got Rebecca and Avia have already put together. These are just simply boiled. They're boiled and then finished in a little bit of salt. You can soak them to rehydrate them in advance, or if you're using super fresh beans from someone like a Rancho Gordo or Zursoon out of Idaho, you're going to have really fresh ones that don't necessarily need to be soaked. Boiled, finished with a little bit of salt. They're kind of the definition of beanie comfort. I don't know that that's really a phrase that most people think of as beanie comfort, but nonetheless, they're going to be soft and really delicate. And to go with that, we're going to saute some mushrooms. So in the pan here, nice hot pan, little bit of oil, and like the chefs before me have said, you know, you really want to cook things sort of undisturbed when you're trying to get good color. So we've got our mushrooms here. Looks like a combination of shiitakes and some gray oyster mushrooms. And I think that's the other thing too, that when we look at things, this is Chef Rebecca, by the way, who's responsible for putting all of this together. So hats off to her. You know, when we say things like you can't know it without loving it, or the other way around, really the beauty of these ingredients is something to be honored. And so if you're able to showcase to your customers, you know, the different textures in mushrooms or really celebrate them, it's a great kind of jumping off point. So we're gonna get these mushrooms started over high heat and then just let them cook for a little bit. And after they're sauteed down and roasted, we're going to finish them with a marinade of some olive oil, sherry vinegar, and fresh herbs and garlic. And what that's going to do is really, as they cool, it's a classic Spanish technique called escabeche. It's going to take those flavors and really bring them to the center so that you're getting something, the meatiness of mushrooms people expect, but when you're finishing it with a heavy douse of sherry vinegar, they're going to have a little bit of acidity to it too, which is a bit eye-catching or eye-turning. So from that, we are going to start plating this up. Thank you. So this is, in a restaurant scenario, I would use as kind of a main course, or you could use it as a lunch. You could certainly add in a protein as well if you wanted. If you wanted to serve something like a poached salmon with it, or really anything. A duck leg with the beans would be a really natural combination. And these beans are finished just with a little bit of salt, cooked in water, no additional stock needed. They're so flavorful as it is. So we're going to put those down as the base of your dish, and a little bit of that liquid there. So as you can see, we're getting nice browning on those mushrooms, and we're going to let them continue to cook. And then on top of the beans that we're going here is our massage kale. This kind of took root a couple of years ago, raw kale, and how to take it from something that you kind of have to, chew for a long time, to something that's really tender and delicate on the plate. And so all we did here was strip the kale from the leaves, give it a quick chiffonade, and then give it a back rub until it's tender, just like the rest of us when we get a back rub. And what you're looking for doneness is to take this kale, and if you really mash it together with your hands, you'll see how the color changes. So we're going from kind of the bright green of a fresh kale leaf into something darker, and then always taste it. If it tastes tender to you, it's going to taste tender to your guests, and you can go straight in. It doesn't need to be cooked in advance of that. So what we'll do, be sure that I don't burn things. So again, that's the level of browning that you're looking for. And then we're going to take this bowl and pop the mushrooms into it. And again, imagine if you were doing this at scale in a restaurant setting, you could certainly, You could certainly roast these in an oven. You can deep fry them, any sort of thing that's going to give you that nice dark edges, crispy edges, and a little bit of browning. Finish it with some of the sherry vinegar, a little bit of olive oil, and the herbs, and then just let that sit. And that's going to be you can do that ahead, you can prep it as a large batch, or do it a la menu as well, but it depends on what your service setting is. So back to plating our individual dish on the line. We've got braised cranberry beans. We're going to top it with a nice pile of this massage kale, and then a little bit of these roasted mushrooms that Rebecca did in advance for us. And so those are going to provide the acid to the dish and also be a textural difference from the beans themselves. And I pretty much like everything with a nice slice of toasted or grilled bread. This bread it was brushed with a little bit of olive oil and then grilled. And then we're just taking a clove of garlic and giving it a rub down. And that's just going to impart a little tiny bit of garlic flavor with it. Tuck that in the side there. And that's our first dish here. So again, really creamy beans, cooked simply in water, fresh green kale, roasted escabeche mushrooms, and then the garlicky char of the bread. So you're getting lots of different textures in this single dish here. And if you wanted to top it with a soft poached egg or some other sort of animal protein, no one's going to complain about that either. So that's our first one. The next place we're going is into BBLT. So, BLTs, again, Jennifer said, avid Midwesterner and comfort food eater, and I love a BLT, but I also really love what we've started calling a BBLT, which is a black bean lettuce and tomato sandwich. So all we're doing, these beans were cooked by frying off a little bit of smoked paprika, chili flakes, and cumin seed. That's my standard base for black beans. I love the smokiness that comes from the smoked paprika. The cumin is obviously a classic combination with black beans, and then the chili flakes for heat. You can toast those spices separately in a frying pan. Otherwise, just go straight into the pan, little bit of oil, and it'll bloom while it's cooking. And then you're gonna add the beans into it to drop that temperature. Cook them in water, bring them up to a boil, reduce to a simmer, cook until they're tender, and that's what we've got here. So you've got a nice amount of liquid. You can see over the top of that liquid some of the oil that the spices were cooked in. It's a lovely color, which I think you can see in the ladle here, that it's gonna be perfumed with the chili flake and the smoked paprika. And then we're just gonna take this, I generally let that sit overnight so that those flavors blend together. And then ladle them with a good little bit of that liquid, which will just make it easier to blend in the bowl itself. We're gonna close the lid and then kick it on. So in the same way that you can make, basically any legume is sort of hummusable in the same way that a chickpea is. So this is black beans, cooked down, they're liquid, and that's it. And it's just blending up. You can do this with lentils, you could do it with split peas, really, again, just about anything. And you're blending it so that you're making that kind of smooth paste. Give this a second to see. And if it feels like it's coming together kind of loosely, like this one is a little bit here, it will start to thicken up after it's cooled. But if that's the case, it's a little bit of just kind of back and forth with the amount of liquid that you're adding. So if it feels a little loose, drain off some more of the black beans to give it a little bit more heft, and then blend again. Thank you. And as that whirls around, what we'll do is start building our sandwich. So we've got 2 slices, again, grilled off whole wheat bread. We're gonna take the hummus when it's ready and smear it pretty thickly on, you could do one side or both sides. I like to just do one side because otherwise it tends to kind of shoot out when you bite into it. We'll lay down the romaine lettuce and tomato. And as this blends, you can see it's starting to thicken up now. So I'm gonna transfer it to a bowl just so that if you don't take anything else away from this cooking demo, take this away, which is the best way to either have you or your staff clean out a food processor. This was taught to me by Roger Bowser at Zingerman's Deli on the first day that I was in the kitchen, and it continues to be one of the best kitchen techniques I've ever learned. So scrape out about 80% or so, but avoid the blade on that. And then just pop it back on. Give it one quick little pulse. And the blade has been spun totally clean. So then you can take the blade out and scrape it out without fear of dinging up your spatula or whatever on that blade there, and you'll get the most out of that food processor possible. So again, if you take nothing else from what I just said, I just learned something. It really is, it's like every time somebody's like, oh, why did I never think of that? There you go. So then we'll take, and like I said, these are still pretty warm. As it cools, it's gonna firm up, so you will get something that's much more of a like strict hummus texture. We're gonna take a spoonful and layer it onto our sandwich. Here. And then give it that big flip. And then you can take your knife, you could go across the side like that, or you could go into triangles. Thank you. And if you were to serve this with, a green salad, a big plate of fries, or our bar snacks that are coming up, that's going to be a really nice lunch or something for a fast casual scenario, things like that there. And again, fully vegan. You could certainly still add sliced turkey or bacon to that if you wanted, but you're going to get that smokiness from the smoked paprika, the richness from the hummus itself, and then that same bright crunch from the tomato and the lettuce, all anchored in that whole wheat bread. So then our final dish that we're going to make, thank you, is effectively a new form of corn nut. So if you are in a bar scenario or some sort of snacking situation, my favorite thing to do is to take these big, giant gigante beans. And again, if you look at the different ways that these beans are presenting themselves, these are the black beans, really small and compact, really, really dense with flavor. Again, from Rancho Gordo, I think we all owe Steve Sando a debt of gratitude for really kind of pioneering the artisan bean movement. But something like this, compared to these giant gigante beans, you're going to get very different textures, very different flavors, all within that same bean family. So as Chef Tanis was saying earlier, you know, these ingredients have so much diversity in their families that is really just a joy to showcase. So that's a little just love for different types of beans. But we're going to take these big gigante beans, and then we're going to make a marinated oil, or an infused oil rather. So we've got something, just a little bit of neutral oil. I like a rice bran or grapeseed oil. You could use something like an olive oil or a nut oil, but since we're adding all of this other flavor to it, you're just almost competing flavors. So this is also a really cost-effective oil if everyone's watching their margins. You can get them. I tend to steer away from soy and corn oil simply to incentivize the growing of other things like grapeseed or sunflower, safflower, things like that. Putting it over the burner, we're just looking for it to get a little bit of movement to it, so not ripping hot, but moving around enough that it's going to be able to infuse those flavors. And then I like to turn the oil off because I have tendency to get distracted, which also means burning stuff. And then we are going to add the garlic to it, and you can see on the camera, it's not sizzling hot, you know, because that little bit of garlic isn't going to be able to drop the temperature of your oil. So it's hard to get that garlic to keep it from burning without being able to drop that entire temperature. So it's just going to simmer in that warm oil. We're going to add a little bit of lemon zest and give it a stir with a sprig of rosemary. And then I also really love this with either chili flakes or Aleppo pepper, something like that. You could also make it with something like chamomile pollen or fennel pollen or herbes de Provence or things like that, and really showcase all different sorts of flavors in that marinating oil. And you'll see when it's made ahead of time, it's going to go from that raw, sort of really tight colors and flavors to something that looks sort of melty and warm and delicious. And then what I like to do is use either a strainer or a spotted spoon and hold back the bulk of those solids because they tend to burn in the oven. You're just going to dress them, toss them over our beans, give a quick little stir with some salt. And again, these beans have just been cooked simply in water. There was some salt added to the cooking liquid just so that it gets into the center of that. Transfer them to either a parchment lined baking sheet, Silpat, any of those sorts of things. And then especially in an industrial oven, you can roast it at high convection and then end up with something just like this. So you can see the difference in these beans after the cooking process. It's a double cooking process, going from that kind of rich, creamy to something that's light and crunchy, really feathery on the outside, and again, reminiscent of your classic dive bar corn nut, but made with locally grown beans that are really a different texture altogether. And that's what I mean by bringing people along. So you're taking something familiar, giving it a little bit of a tweak, and then presenting it in a new way. This is also a really affordable way if you're looking for those add-on sales, something like, you know, people are buying a beer, they're going to buy a salad, but while they sit and eat, they just want something to snack on. these are also affordable enough that you can give them away as a, a welcome little gift to the table, something like that, that really bridges that hospitality that we were talking about earlier of making people feel looked after and cared for and not super laden down. I love a jalapeno popper myself, but this is something I could eat a lot of and not feel bad the next day. And so those are our two different ways to present these beans in the inside here.
Okay.
Abra, I know that you did want to just end your talk with talking about the seasonality of beans and grains, and so if you want to go ahead and mention that.
Yeah, thank you. It's amazing how much you forget when you're actually standing up here, and you can have the best laid plans, and then it goes right out the window as soon as you're looking out. And Jennifer reminds me of this. So all of these ingredients, we talk a lot about the local seasonal food movement, and that really started in a lot of ways around vegetables and the hyper seasonality of things like asparagus, rhubarb, strawberries, even lettuce greens. And my argument is that these are also agricultural products that showcase the work of growers across the nation, across the world. And while they have a season as well, beans are planted in the spring, they grow throughout the summer, they dry down in the fall, and they're harvested to a point and dried to a point where they're shelf stable. They don't function in our kitchens like seasonal products. They're kind of the stable part of our kitchens. And so in a food service situation, you can then take those ingredients and really showcase them at any point of the year. And like the cranberry bean salad that we showed, you could do those same beans in the same way, and then as soon as you get asparagus, shave it raw, dress it with some lemon and a little bit of tarragon and fresh radishes for the spring. You could have it with braised peppers and eggplant and something like that for in the height of summertime. Serve it with wedges of roasted squash or ribbons of apple and squash and walnut together. They're really kind of canvases for anything else that's coming through your kitchen. And in the same way that meat kind of functions in that same way, I think that these really protein-dense pantry staples are a great way to do that and to tell that story.
Thank you. So let's give Chef Abra Berens a thank you.
Thank you so much.
You will be able to try her BBLTs at lunch, which we're going to next. This will feature tastings from Oatly, Barilla America, Finless Foods, the Mushroom Council, North Harvest Bean Growers Association, and Numu Food Group. Chef Abra and Chef Mai will be signing books, and you'll be able to ask them questions and engage with them. And then we're going to come back here to Ecolab promptly at 1:15 for our next session on Korean plant-based cooking from the home to the temple. And we do have a request when you do come back for this next session. We are very honored to have the Venerable Jong Kwan Sunim here as part of this panel, and she made a very long flight to us from Korea, and we are trying to get her back to get her that positive or to that negative COVID test and get on that plane. So we will have baskets with masks at the top and the bottom of Ecolab. We ask that you wear them, and if you happen to see her afterwards and you want to say hello, you want to ask her a question, to make sure that you put those on. So we just appreciate your understanding there. So thank you very much. Let's go to lunch.